grateful to all of you because you've come here for this roundtable. The information uses the temperature in this outside. Before I came here, I bought this in the underground crossing, and the question that I asked, is that of good quality? She said, yeah, I have all the documents, and the document showed that she received it in the morning, so I shouldn't have any questions on the quality, but I still have questions. It doesn't look well, I will remove it, but please remember our target audience of our roundtable. These are people who have doubts on what they are buying, especially when they see a lot of negative news. Media helps in that, and the question I would like to ask you, are the rules in the European Union which are to be harmonized with our rules, are they such that would help the consumers to be sure that they buy quality products? Is it possible? Is it possible in Ukraine, and when? If not, what problems are to be addressed so that we know that? I will start from Volodymyr Lapa. Please stick to the timetable. Take just 7 minutes to explain what things we need to understand. We understand that we cannot pass the law today, and tomorrow this brownie will be fine, and we will understand better what it is. Volodymyr, the floor is yours. Thank you. It's an interesting question. Are there requirements? Yes, there are. And there should be the commodity transportation bill of lading, which regulates all the transportation of food products. Can we ensure implementing these requirements? Rather no than yes. We as a competent body, so that we can go to and to control you as the consumer, you should buy this donut, and you should see, if you see that it doesn't correspond to the legislation, then you write a claim to territorial body. They transfer this claim to us. We give it to the body that's developing the policy on the safety of products, which is the Ministry of Agriculture. So the time between we write the claim until the time we go to check this time is very long, and a different donut will be on the shelf. So it is very difficult to exercise the effective control. In many cases, it is impossible. In this context, we need to understand that the Ukrainian system of safety of food products is at the transitional period of time. We partially implemented the European legislation, partially we have old post-Soviet legislation, and partially it's Ukrainian know-how. When we cannot go to do the control quickly. It's not the case in other European countries, but I can say that the Verkhovna Rada approved the draft on the draft bill. There was the second reading, the second reading. We worked actively, and we had a very big discussion with many MPs, with Oksana. Most of the proposals were taken into consideration, and before the second reading, this will be a better document. The law approved by the Verkhovna Rada is now at the President. The President should sign it. We hope it will be signed by the President. I believe that we need to develop regulations, more than 40 regulatory acts, and then 9 months after it's published, we'll have the system of control, which is maybe close to the system of control, which is effective in the European Union. 9 months is to change the ideology of the system. That's checklists. It is the possibility not to impose fines. There are many moments which balance the interests of the producer and the consumer. Plus, at the level of internal procedures, we introduce the regime of video registration. It will be introduced in all our territorial bodies so that we can check whether it's true or not. How they will inform. So basically, in theory, the control is possible. In practice, it's very complicated. But there is a certain perspective, and we are moving towards the European Union in talking about legislation. Now I would like to give the floor to Maryna, Nelina, representative of Government Office for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration. Can you tell us how can it work in Ukraine, European rules, European standards, and what it will give us? What it will give not to some, what it will give us, the consumers. After signing the association agreement, we need to understand that even though the market is open for trade with third countries, it's directed towards development of foreign economic ties, but it has strict requirements to goods which are supplied to this market. The European Union has one of the best systems of standardization of the safety of food products and a very good system of control. The main principle of EU is the protection of consumers' rights. The high level of health protection is the priority task for the EU in the sector of producing food products, and the countries which want to export to the EU have to create the similar system of control to guarantee that European consumer that will be buying these products will have the same level of protection as the one that's guaranteed by their own countries and European Commission. What is the system of control about? The EU has some requirements, mandatory requirements. To describe them briefly, they are following three main principles. The European Commission has a unique duty to control the countries, members, and the countries that export their products to the EU to be sure that these systems are efficient, that if there's export from the third countries, that these systems are equivalent to the one that is in the EU. Also, the country states are responsible, or if the products are imported, then the authorities are responsible for setting the official system of control in order to check the efficiency of self-control by operators who are conducting entrepreneurial activity in the field of food industry. And also operators and farmers are to follow the EU rules, and they are to exercise self-control. This is all part of the commitments according to Section 4 of Association Agreement. In this context, I would like to mention that today 280 Ukrainian companies, including 98 producers of food products, have the right to export to the EU countries. Taking into account the EU requirements and in order to create the system of safety of food products, the law of Ukraine was passed 0906 on state control. It's now at the President. It is to be signed. When the law becomes effective, it will ensure implementation of basic principles of the system of control in the sphere of safety of food products. And this based on risk-oriented approach. We also need to mention that when drafting this law and in the process of drafting the law, the representatives of business and business associations participated. Also, a lot of attention is paid in the European Union to the avoiding contamination of food products and forage for animals. The EU establishes maximum permissible levels of contamination of such products. The materials which are in contact with food products are also regulated to exclude any contamination. Also, there are draft laws of Ukraine on requirements to materials and objects that contact with food products being developed. Passing this draft laws will open up new opportunities for domestic business in the EU markets. This will mean that Ukrainian products correspond to world requirements on safety. During the last 6 years between Ukraine and the EU, there are negotiations on recognizing the equivalence of certification of seeds. According to the latest information, the final decision on Ukraine will be passed by the end of 2017 or in the beginning of 2018. One minute. Also, another issue is supplying organic products to the EU market. In 2016, it achieved almost 30 billion euros. "95% of organic products exported in Ukraine abroad to implement the provisions of Regulation 1830 on GMOs. The draft law is developed on introducing amendments to some laws on GMOs. And that is in the process of being approved. Besides, there's a draft law on main principles and requirements to organic production in the Verkhovna Rada. All these initiatives will create pretext to increase the export of organic products to the EU, because there's a big demand in Europe for such products. Summing it up, I would like to say that the European market is perspective for Ukrainian companies on condition that Ukraine exercises all its commitments and the protection of domestic consumer will be enhanced. Thank you. I would like to ask Gennadiy Kuznetsov from the League of Producers of Food Products how fast it could be created. In the Soviet Union, we had the cars for the Soviet Union and then the cars for export. Maybe we'll be supplying some good quality products elsewhere, but in Ukraine we'll have bad quality products. I would like to first talk about more general problems. What should the state do? First, establish requirements, and secondly, control whether they are implemented. These are obvious things, but let's look at the first task, to establish requirements. If you look at European food legislation, it's approximately 120 main documents. The total number of pages is 8,000. 8,000 pages. When we are saying that we are trying to harmonize our legislation with European, we need to clearly understand what is the volume of legislative drafting that needs to be done to harmonize our legislation with European, because passing 1, 2, 3 laws will not address the problem. If you remember the number of documents that I mentioned, even let's hope that soon the President will sign the draft law 0906. It provides for passing about 35, 40 different bylaws, and that needs to be done within 9 months. We believe that if we want to get closer to the EU legislation during the next 3 or 4 years, we need to pass 30, 40 minimum regulations every year. Minimum. Talking about 2016 as an example, we addressed our authorities who are controlling how many documents were passed in 2016. We found out, we received the answer from someone we did not receive, but they were mentioning 3, 4 documents. Why are we so slow in adapting our legislation to European? The problem, first of all, is in capacities that can do it. Who can write it? Who can draft it? This is the legislation which is considered to be the most complicated in the world. And people who draft it, they should have knowledge in many spheres, technical, legal sphere. Unfortunately, there are very few people like that in the civil society and in government. And that is the biggest problem which we need to address in order to address the bigger problem, the harmonization of legislation. Without that, the next steps, implementation, what I mentioned in the beginning, that is another difficult task. In 2005, the law on safety and quality of food products was passed. Back in 2005, it said that the state control should be risk-oriented. Now is 2017, 20 years passed, but we still don't have a risk-oriented approach in planning and in state control. And that is an example of how much should be done so that our system of control corresponds to the European. First, a lot of legislation is to be drafted, and then we should implement it all in a European way. If we do these two things, then we can say that our consumer is protected at the same level as the European one. We need to understand it. Unfortunately, in the society, when people say that we harmonize legislation, we pass several laws, and as if we have done everything. We have not done it. We have just started doing it, but that is not enough. Thank you. Now, Oksana Prodan.
Є такий прогноз.
Do we have a realistic forecast about cooperation and the activity of Supreme Council, and about the activity of Parliament, its active work to create such a legislative base? Good afternoon. I would like to say that here in Ukraine 3 years ago, we can celebrate anniversary on the 23rd of June, new edition of law on main principles and qualities of food product was adopted, and this draft law was approximating the norms, and 3 years ago Ukrainian producers got the right to export their products to Europe. And the same law envisages the protection of consumers, and the state is able to provide safety of products. What should state guarantee? That the products we buy in shops or in the market, they should be safe. And this donut you've shown us, that the state is responsible for its quality, so safety. So the producers, they know the requirements, and they are afraid of this control, and they pay officially or unofficially for this. And in order to implement and meet all those requirements to provide safety of products, a lot should be done by producers. They do it or they do not do it, and pay to those who do not find violations. And we hope that maybe they wait for 22nd of July in order to sign it. And this law reinforces the opportunities for control and increases requirements and protects business from corruption through this bigger situation. And we specified in the law the opportunities of business and the responsibilities of controlling bodies in order to protect the consumers. So whether we can implement it fully, and when the law on control of quality of safety of products be adopted, the main task is and the state service for quality control and other organizations, they should continue the activity that to protect consumers. What is important? We protect consumers, and when you asked that and said that we protect only foreign consumers, this is not the case. So we won't sell something so everything depends on controlling body. They should do their work without corruption and bias. And if there are controlling bodies in Europe, there are also controlling bodies in Ukraine. And we will provide safe products to consumers, and at the same time we provide the producer to be protected and to be protected from corruption, because consumers pay for corruption. When business pays additional payments for permits or for some unnecessary things, this is all incorporated in the cost of the product for consumers. So there is it was said that this protection is envisaged by law, and we protect the consumer from dangerous products, and we protect customers and producers. We give the opportunity to producer to export the products and to increase production and decrease the cost of products and guarantee the safety of products. They can get additional opportunities both for consumers and producers. This is a positive circle that provides opportunities to consumers, Ukrainian consumers, and they can be sure that these products are safe. And when some products are so according to current legislation and the new law that reinforces responsibility, these responsibilities are divided between the buyer and seller and the producer. So if you have this donut, you at each stage there is a responsible person or entity. So the law obliges state bodies to control and to provide safety of food products. And I believe that the new law that I hope will be signed soon, it reinforces the protection of consumers. And except other, what are the other services that are responsible for safety of products? So there is a problem with the falsification of brands and selling of no one knows what. So who are the responsible parties? When we are speaking about safety of products, it should be controlled and guaranteed by the state service that supervises the safety of products. So I would like to address Yevheniy Gorovets, EU project improvement of food safety control system in Ukraine. So what are the prospects in this area? So the prospects of our country concerning approximation EU standards in the sphere of adherence to the requirements, as Mr. Kuznetsov said, a lot of legislative acts should be adopted for this. So our legislation only outlines the main principles of European legislation, but the devil is in the detail, and the quality of our legislation assessed by experts, and it is assessed based on the assessment of segments. And if we are speaking about the norms of contacting materials, so for example, some materials we enroll food products in, so there should be standards for isolating materials And regulation is lagging behind in this respect, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. The same can be said about such an aspect like informing the consumers. The legislation should specify the products and marking for these products, and this can be like a puzzle, and it can introduce the system of safety that exists in the European Union. I would like to briefly outline the situation starting 2013, when the revolution of dignity happened, and after this there was a situation of a weak state. The president fled the country, and in this context, the majority of Ukrainian citizens, they were not satisfied with the quality of work, and we had a trend. We went to another side, and we decided to remove the state from the business and other areas, because the state does not support national interests, and the civil servants want just to fill their pockets. And there was a moratorium on checks because the state didn't implement its functions properly and was nearly destroyed. And how can the state verify those economic entities that bear the burden? And there was a law adopted that banned these checks, and economic entities that deal with food products, and the period of this moratorium, it is too long. It could be viewed as a temporary thing. There should be some unnecessary things removed, and the control should have been restarted, because there should be adequate requirements to production of food products and their distribution. But the availability of these requirements is not enough. You can have clear rules like in Europe, but if you do not control the implementation, you cannot even dream about the system of control and provision of safety. And until 2017, state service, it didn't carry out any checks because there was a ban, and the European partners, they did not close the market. This was just helped our country in difficult times, and our European partners, they expressed dissatisfaction because Ukraine is moving slowly towards the meeting of European requirements. And in 2017, the service got the right to verify the producers of the food products, but about non-regular checks, it is done, and there is a mechanism to get permits from Ministry of Agricultural Policy. So when the consumer says that he bought the product that is not safe, so our experts cannot just go on site and to find the reasons. They just write letters to the Ministry of Agricultural Policy. They review the case, and in the month they say you can come and verify, but this verification loses sense, so we just lose money without achieving any results. So here I came up to the topic that some bodies of power do not understand the importance of the issue of safety of products. This topic cannot just be aside, and there should be proper checks for different markets, for different products, because risks differ. So we invited Mr. Maksym Barabukha, Director of Quality Control Department of Fozzy Group. So, because I understand that you may get some complaints on the products, so how can this quality of the products be provided, and whether it will work better if we harmonize our legislation with the European one? As the Director of the Quality Control Department of Fozzy Group, and to continue the topic we discuss, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that our producers, they are guided by three types of requirements in the activity. The first one is regulatory acts established by the state. Next is their own requirements that can be even tougher than those established by legislation. And the third requirement is the requirement that is put by counteragents and consumers, organizations they work with. In this context, it would be interesting to discuss in what way these requirements can help producers, because the responsibility for the safety of the products lies on the producer. If we are speaking about state requirements, we have laws and bylaws that are partly implemented, and there are prospects on their implementation, and those who will translate and adapt these requirements, and so the culture of producers is important. International corporations, they have corporate standards, starting with finances to the control of quality and laboratory tests, and there are other types of producers that want to meet only requirements established by the state, and also there are some producers that do not want to adhere even to Ukrainian legislation. And the third, these are partners who sign additional agreements on quality and safety of products, and they demand from producers to adhere to these norms. I'm saying about retail in Ukraine, and it's not a secret that
this is no secret that every large operator in the retail market has some people who are working on quality and safety of products. When you buy the bad quality donut, the person will go to a shop or will call the hotline, and adding additional requirements in the supply agreements, we as the operator of the market will receive additional guarantee that the producer will implement all basic requirements on quality and safety and our requirements. What requirements I mean? First of all, it's about controls. If the state needs a month and a half to go with the inspection, then we need day-to-days. We need just to agree with the producer the day and time of when we go for inspection. Basically, if it's up to the products of their own products, this could be the issue of several hours, the matter of several hours. If there is an incident, we can remove these products from selling. We need 1 hour to send information to all the stores so that bad quality products are not on sale, and also agree with the seller, with the producer, the possibility about visiting the facilities. So the producer is interested in resolving this incident as soon as possible. And then I would like to mention why it could be difficult for business to get adapted to changes which are being implemented in legislation as to safety of and quality of food products. There are some things which are not acceptable for business. I do not understand why producers have to pay to the state for using state standards. I don't know a single civilized country in the world where you need to pay money so that you have formal grounds to produce the products according to the state standard. If you are willing to follow all the requirements of the regulatory documents. Also, there's another issue: opposition or resistance to implementing European norms. I will give you an example. It's more the question to state, consumer service, or maybe to the Ministry of Public Health. 1 minute. To people who are involved in legislative drafting. It's about nitrates. These are the harmful substances. In European countries, there's research that proves that people who consume a lot of fruit and vegetables, then the potential risk related to nitrates. All the fruit and vegetable products have nitrates. And even the largest Ukrainian producers, when they use the arguments that they receive from their foreign consultants on growing tomatoes or cucumbers, they fail to convince anyone in canceling this norm, because this is the norm which doesn't exist in Europe. But no one can cancel it in our country. That's interesting. First, I would like to ask Oksana Skytalinska, who's promoting healthy nutrition. And we invited you to ask a simple question. From what you know, introducing such standards, we hope that this will happen. Will it allow people to get higher quality products? One thing is you can explain to people, another thing is to remove from the shelves what is harmful. Good afternoon, thank you for inviting me. Because I do not represent any interest, but I represent just myself and Ukrainian people. I promote healthy life. And Ukraine is moving forward to Europe because people are interested in healthy life and healthy nutrition and physical activity. I see that from the number of followers of my page. I would like to see what's down there on this donut. Why there's nothing? It should say how much sugar is there, how much fat, which fats are saturated, which trans fats are there. As a consumer, you do not know that, but you should know that, because when we are saying, I don't know about how many laws, how many pages are to be signed, but I know there are things which are to be made now, the steps that could improve the health of Ukrainians. Just imagine. In this donut, there are 2 grams of trans fats, and that enhances by 23% the risk of cardiovascular diseases. In Ukraine, 70% lethality is caused by cardiovascular diseases. Everyone should be talking about that, and it should be written what we are drinking, what we are eating. The mother of one girl on Facebook yesterday published. It's a teacher who shows what the mother gave to her daughter to the camp. There's some yogurt. Each one of these products has more than 2 grams of trans fats, and that's for a child that's developing. I can say about certain things. Trans fats, caffeine should be ruined. If we are going to Europe, this law is to be passed. Of course, producers can say that that's too expensive, but I think if you sit and if you think about that with the producers, you can think of such a composition of a product that would not demand so many trans fats. The production will be not so profit-losing for producer, also marking the product. Here, there's nothing. There's the promotion of Coca-Cola. There's nothing that would indicate how much of what we're eating. We're eating many of these trans fats, then marking. You can very often you cannot read it. It's too tiny letters. If it's trans fat, you need to say that that's trans. I will tell you what's trans fat. That's artificially modified oil, which has become solid. It can be preserved long, and it makes the product cheaper. On the one hand, it's good, but it's bad for a human being because such fat spoils everything at the level of the cells. It ruins cells. It increases the risk of oncology diseases and other diseases. You need to calculate how much will it cost if you transfer to this production. Definitely, we need to talk about trans fats. Why I'm talking about that? That is what is everywhere in any candy, chocolate, and dry breakfast and mayonnaises. We get it every day. 50% of processed products have it. Also, many people do not know what it is. They believe it's palm oil. And many people talk against palm oil is insaturated oil. It's not dangerous for a person. Then the amount of sugar or sugar substitutes. First sugar and then many sugar substitutes. We don't know what we eat. In Europe, it says clearly how much there could be aspartame or cyclamat, but cyclamat, saccharin, they are quite cheap, and they substitute a lot of sugar. They also cause problems. They cause many diseases. You were talking about nitrates. They are not as dangerous. GMOs are not as dangerous, but the number of conservants which are in sausages, again, we need to. There should be. It should be written how many of them are there. They are cancerogenous substances of A class. First that's trans fats, then sugar substitutes, salt, and colorings. The trans fats should be reduced. Because if you say that, if you mark and marking should be readable, and I would like to remind, before one of such countries, advanced countries as Denmark in 2000, they cancelled all trans fats and products. Before that, there was a big information campaign. They were explaining to people what it was. And so people were perceived it well. And the brief comment, Oksana, Volodymyr, on standardization of the products. And I'm interested if we can do it, if we can enhance the quality. Will it mean that the products will become more expensive? Did you calculate whether we will have to pay more for increased quality? It's not said by laws, but by bylaws. That's why I give the floor to Vladimir. Talking about trans fats, it's not about the cost, it's about how long will these products be preserved. It's a compromise between a term of preservation and the content. I believe that we need to inform about the content. In the European Union, they think about prohibiting that. Also, the norms, not at the level of laws, but bylaws, will be adapted to the requirements and bylaws of European Union. We are working jointly with the Ministry of Environment, with the International Financial Corporation, with European colleagues, starting from heavy metals and down to nitrates. And I agree with the colleagues that in some cases Ukrainian norms are stricter than in the European Union. And the discussion is whether we just introduce these norms, or we will leave some fluctuations in Ukrainian legislation. I believe that Ukraine has not so strong scientific potential, because in the European Union they have big organizations which are doing risk assessment, especially when it comes to safety of food products. There's an organization where there are several thousand people working, and the budget is 700 million euros a year. That's just to do risk analysis, and it's difficult to compete with the European Union. Will have to mechanically approximate, I believe, with the exception of some episodes where there will be substantiation that our requirements are better than European ones. We are looking at the possibility to implement the new law. Once we're talking about the draft law 0609, we have about 10 bylaws drafted. 10 or 15 are being drafted, and I believe that we will do everything within these 9 months, and the law will be signed by the President, and we'll start moving towards European Union, not just in words but in practice. Because when getting to European or Chinese market, we check whether our producers correspond to the requirements of the legislation where the product should go. So we are talking not just about mechanical adaptation, but on the one hand our consumer is not worse than the European, but with the adaptation and the approximation of legislation implementing our norms will be the precondition for getting to European markets. But I agree with Gennadiy that that's quite a difficult process, because we have the strategy on phytosanitary legislation till 2021. At the legislative level, that means a lot of difficult work, and a lot is to be done at the governmental level. But I can say that we and our European colleagues were carefully looking. We were trying not to lag behind. I believe that this year, next year, we'll catch up, so that in 2021 we have something similar to European food legislation.
I would like to say that the examples made on nitrates and trans fats, it confirms that in the bodies of power that deals with the issue of establishment of requirements, we do not lack people. We lack people who deal with these issues. There are several people in the ministries, but that is all. And that this is a catastrophe for the country, and there should be proper departments that would deal exclusively with the issues of with these issues. And we put this issue on the agenda many times. Without it, we cannot go further. And concerning trans fats, there is draft law developed by the Ministry of Healthcare, and this is now being discussed. And the issue is that this is a complex issue. And of course, trans fat should be limited, and we should find the most efficient way how to make it work. And these issues are politicized. Some people say that they should be completely banned, but we cannot fully ban GMOs. Unfortunately, so you say that it should not be done, but many people do not understand technical issue. This is a complex issue, how to establish indicators in order to implement this, not just to ban 100%, and that is all. So that's why we should create draft laws that could be implemented in life. So one more example. And this is not properly discussed in terms of legislation and state control. Here in our country, we have 3 institutions that deal with the quality and safety. This is the Ministry of Healthcare and Ministry of Agriculture that should establish the requirements, and the Service on Safety of Products, and we have clear distribution of functions. And when we say that we should establish requirements, we should address not to the service but to the Ministry of Healthcare and to the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, and ask them what they did in order to adapt our legislation and approximate it to the European ones. So, and they sometimes answer, maybe we can hear this answer, but the matter is they do not have people who would deal with these issues, so they lack staff, and this is a big problem that should be resolved. And going back to the issue, painful issue, this is the issue of falsification. When I was coming to this meeting, I looked in the internet how they assess in different countries the markets of falsified products. This is about 10%. And the data of UNO shows that approximately 10%, depending on the country. But on average, it is 10% of falsified products. And in order to understand falsification in Ukraine, we should carry out tests. And And when they say that some markets have some percentage of fake products, so we should have proper grounds how to verify this information and what way we can do it. And in our opinion, here there should be legislation and the requirements of legislation, and there should be close cooperation of the operators of the market and controlling body, that is the service of of control of safety of products. So we have a lot of institutions, and the Institute of Safety of Products. So many institutions deal with this issue. There is a distribution that first, this is the risk assessment, scientific opinion that should be expressed by the institute concerning this issue. But if you ask them about the funds allocated by the state for this research, they would say that this is zero. And the most simple way how to come out of the situation is that in the EU there is an independent scientific body that calls ESTA, and you can translate it differently, but this is the body that verifies safety of products, and it is financed from the funds of the European Commission. So this body is independent, and it is carrying out research on safety of products and feed for animal, and so we should rely on their opinion and establish requirements. And the ministry should establish the requirements, the Ministry of Healthcare and the Ministry of Agrarian Policy, but this is a complex issue because there are many options and mechanisms of dealing with this problem. Scientific opinion is only scientific opinion. So scientists say, for example, that trans fats are not good for health. And we agree with this. And then a difficult task appears, how to establish mechanisms, how to limit, how to protect consumers. Thank you. Do you have questions? Please introduce yourself first. Good afternoon, Olga Pritko, Pravda media outlet. I have several questions to Volodymyr Ivanovich. When will this draft law be adopted? What percentage of enterprise will have problems with the checks? Maybe you can name the segments. And second question, when these norms are implemented, what export markets will open for us, and Ukrainian products will go to these markets, and the products will meet the standards of those markets. Draft law on state control, as Oksana Petrovna said, there are basic requirements implemented and adopted 3 years ago. These are the operators of the food product market. They should be registered, and the place where this donut was sold, there should be proper registration. So these enterprises should be in the registry, and we had 145,000, and now we have 150,000, and this is half of those operators of the market that work in the market. So this is a basic requirement, the registration facilities, and a lot of entities did not adhere to this requirement. And it's not about imposing fines, but this year we focus our work on of the territorial body to launch an information campaign. Fine is only an instrument in reaching the goal, but there should be proper information campaign in order that entities got registered. And next requirement is HASP starting September, and those who produce products of animals, then for all operators of food products, and this is not 100%. And so the moratorium was imposed for 2 years, and entities got used to a lack of control, and that they feel comfortable in the situation. And about several instances of cases of botulism. So the products should be accompanied by documents, but some invoices are lacking for some products, so this is just neglect of the requirements of law. So we try to evolutionary enter to this liberal system of control, and we should so the majority of enterprises do not adhere to law 100%. So there should be information campaign and proper mechanisms of control, and we try to reach this goal parallel with the elaboration of the draft laws and to establish better control from the state. Second question about the markets where we can export. An example, export to the European Union. Europeans, they have simple approach. If you want to export, we should understand that you have the program of testing for antibiotics, that there is a program of salmonella monitoring, and so on and so forth. So these programs, they are implemented in Ukraine, they work, but this is not 100%. In order to fully implement legislation, these are hundreds of pages of documents and years of work. So it cannot happen so that the law is adopted and everyone is easily exporting. So this is an evolutionary way. And when the system strengthens at different levels, and when there is proper approximation, so we will reach not only European markets, because we had the mission with China concerning red meat, and the basic requirements are the same. So by reaching this, by bringing this system and by approximating with the EU legislation, we simplify entering not only to European markets but also to other markets of the world. Please, Yevheniy, Oksana and Gennadiy. I would like to add European norms and requirements to production of food products. They were introduced in 2014 when the basic law was adopted, and now it depends on the producers what products have more opportunities to be sold to the European Union, because the producer should make the production in order that it would correspond to European legislation. And we wait for the signing of law by the president, and it will provide Ukrainian consumers with a better safety of products. Those products we buy each day. I would like to add concerning consumers, they should understand why we wait for this law for its signing. So the matter is now there is a conflict between the aforementioned law on safety of food products that was adopted in 2014 and came into effect in 2014, and those that is for all operators. So the conflict between these laws, it prevents the introduction of checks without preliminary informing. So first you should inform the operator that you will come and carry out a check in 10 days, and this is an imitation of control, because in these 10 days they will make improvements and they will come, and then the next day they will restart their unfair practices, and the new law lifts this conflict, and the checks will be done without preliminary informing. And the competent body in Ukraine, this is the State Service on Safety of Products, it can stop production if it doesn't correspond to legislation and poses threat to health of consumers. And according to current legislation, before this law was signed, it can be done only by court decision, and we know that courts are slow in their operation, and even with best approach it takes a week or even several months. That's why if we see a threat, it looks that we cannot stop the activity of such entity, and we should apply to court, and this entity continue to sell its products, and more consumers can be under threat. That's why these are basic things, and the new law solves this problem, and it approximates to the EU legislation. So,
in fact, I would like to argue with Yevgeny. He said that it was impossible to go. That's a long discussion. We will not do it now. I just want to say that, in fact, Ukraine, as the member of World Health Trade Organization, has the right, according to agreements, to do what Yevgeny said, and had the right in 2014 to do and protect consumer from since 2015. I can prove it. But the draft law, which we are talking about now, its main task is to make our system of control resultative and effective. I mean, what I mean by resultative, the state will be able to clearly identify in the market dangerous products, and the trade can be also not fair, and they can do it at a minimal cost, and we pay for that. And the more efficient this service operates, the better it is for us. That is why this draft law has to bring to our legislation to make it harmonized with the European legislation, to create legislative basis for effective and efficient system of state control. And when we are talking about opening the markets, and previously the principle was, we want to import from a specific company these products. We go to this company, we check it, and then we give permit. Now the trend is different. Now they're checking to what extent the controlling body is exercising its functions. If it does, then you don't have to go to the company all the time. You need to check how correctly the controlling body works, and for that the draft law has been written. Thank you for a very interesting discussion. I invite you to meet and discuss on the 23rd of July next year, because I believe that this is what we are asking all the time, all these questions, and in a year we will try to find out what is the stage of harmonizing with EU legislation. Thank you.